My wife was curious about my severance pay. The next day, she left me divorce papers, and the savings book was gone. But I had been waiting for this. I had transferred the money weeks before. My name is David Brown, and I'm 65 years old. I'm a recently retired employee. My family consists of my wife, Nancy, who is 5 years younger than me, and our only son, Richard. Richard was born when I was 33, and he's now married and living on his own. Whenever my son visits with his wife, Nancy always cheerfully orders takeout sushi. A devoted son with a reliable wife and a cheerful spouse of my own, it would appear to anyone to be a warm and happy family. I had planned to spend my golden years leisurely with my loved ones. Thanks for everything, Dad. On the evening of my retirement, Nancy poured me a beer. The table was laden with a feast she had prepared since the afternoon: gratin, pasta, fried chicken, and even my favorite dumplings in various styles. You've made so much. Thank you. It looks delicious. Let's eat. Since our son moved out, it's been just Nancy and me. I'm not much of a talker, but Nancy always kept the conversation lively during meals. She'd share gossip about her friends, celebrity news, or complain about her clothes getting tight. I enjoyed my meal while nodding along. Hey, honey, as I was eating, Nancy spoke to me. You've officially retired now, right? Yes. Is that why you made such a grand meal? Nancy isn't the best cook, but she occasionally put in the effort to make a special meal for me. Regardless of the taste, I was always grateful when she cooked for me. Yeah, sort of. So, now that you've retired, you'll get that, right? The retirement package? She asked hesitantly. I had received the retirement package. Why is she looking at me so intently just to ask that? The retirement package should be deposited by next month. Nancy's face lit up, her eyes sparkling. Then we just have to wait a month for the details, right? Probably, yeah. Nancy was in a great mood all night. About a month later, I checked our account. How much did you get? Around $100,000. It's all in the account. Wow, that much? Nancy covered her mouth with her hand, surprised. She was astonished by the amount, even after deductions for state and federal taxes. If I had held a higher position, I could have gotten more. It's pointless to dwell on it now that I'm retired, but I still felt a twinge of regret, wondering if I could have been promoted if I had pushed a little harder. Still, I've retired now, and I worked hard in my own way. From here on out, I'll make the most of this severance package and my pension. Let's celebrate your severance pay. Time to break out the beers. At dinner, Nancy brought out a bunch of beers. We usually limit ourselves to one beer a day unless it's a special occasion, so this was out of the ordinary. Feeling liberated from work, I happily indulged in more and more beer. The next day, my head was pounding. After drinking too much beer last night, I had crashed into bed and passed out. When I looked at the clock, it was 11 a.m. I always used to wake up at 5 o'clock on weekdays, but beer is a powerful adversary. My head is killing me. Do we have any aspirin? I went to the kitchen for medicine, but Nancy wasn't there. Nancy, where are you? I didn't see her in the living room either, but there was a document and a small note on the table. I'm going on a trip for a week starting today. Please sign this. A trip? This is the first I'm hearing about it. I looked at the other document. It was divorce papers signed by Nancy. What? A divorce? She had left the papers and vanished from the house. I crumpled the note in her handwriting and immediately called her. What's the deal with this sudden divorce? I demanded. I could hear her voice and the bustle of the outside world over the line. There was also a sound like a train station announcement. Was Nancy catching a train? We're both retired now, so let's be free. We'll split the assets. Just sign the papers and file them, she said. Her voice sounded higher and peppier than usual, but the bombshell of divorce made my hangover evaporate in an instant. I can't just accept a snap divorce. Come home and let's talk this through. I'm boarding the train now, so I can't stay on the phone. I'll be back when my trip's over, so file the papers by then. The call cut off abruptly. I slumped into a chair, drained. Split the assets? No way. I jumped up and yanked open the drawer where we kept our valuables. The bank book and seal were gone. We managed our joint account with my salary and Nancy's part-time earnings. Of course, my severance pay was in there too. She'd taken the bank book. Realizing all our assets were gone, my mind went blank. No wonder she was so fixated on money on my retirement day. We still hadn't paid off the mortgage, and a pension alone wouldn't cut it. Should I call the cops? But without knowing where she went, there wasn't much they could do. Besides, the police might not want to get involved in a domestic spat. Wait, I still have that. Just as I thought I was at my wit's end, I remembered my ace in the hole. I opened my desk drawer in the study to check on something. Good, it's still here. Even though the sudden divorce blindsided me, part of me had always seen this coming. Through a mutual friend, I met her at a young age. She was bubbly and had a knack for making men feel special. She was always surrounded by guys, and I remember having plenty of competition. It was almost a miracle that I managed to date and marry her. Nancy was kind to me, and our married life seemed rosy after we tied the knot. She became a full-time housewife, taking care of the home. She struggled with the chores, often serving up kitchen disasters with an apologetic look I found endearing. After our son Richard was born, I started pitching in with housework and childcare to lighten Nancy's load, knowing she was wiped out from childbirth. I'd rush home after work to whip up dinner for her. This is delicious. Thank you, she'd say. However, from that time on, while Nancy doted on our only son, she gradually became harsher towards me. While I'm wearing myself out with childcare, you get to enjoy a leisurely drink by yourself, she'd say. When I was feeding Richard, you were relaxing and watching TV. Now that he's asleep, is it such a big deal if I have a beer? Having a beer at the end of the day was my simple pleasure, but Nancy started to gripe about it. You think you're hot stuff because you work and help with the baby, huh? God, it's so annoying. Plus, you reek. What? But I took a shower, I replied, confused. I later learned that women's sense of smell can change after childbirth. They start to prefer their baby's scent, who shares their genes, but dislike their husband's. This revelation floored me. So that's why Nancy became more critical after giving birth, I figured. I started carrying deodorant and never skimped on hygiene to avoid turning her off. A few years after Richard's birth, Nancy's mood seemed to level out, and she wasn't as harsh with me. After Richard grew up and left the nest, Nancy started going out more and dumped the housework on me. I guess she wanted to cut loose after all those years of childrearing. I got swamped with work and never griped about her gallivanting. About a week later, while I was watching a daytime soap at home, the doorbell rang. I checked the monitor and saw Nancy, whom I hadn't seen in a week. I've been waiting, she said, holding the house key in her hand. The door won't budge. Let me in. After she left, I had changed the lock so the old key wouldn't work. Not wanting a scene on the doorstep, I let her in. You filed the divorce papers at City Hall, right? I'm just here to confirm that. I haven't filed them yet, I said. Nancy's eyes bulged. What? What are you waiting for? You signed them, right? Hurry up and file them. I'm getting alimony from you. There's no money for alimony. You swiped our joint bank book and took off. Nancy glanced around the house, baffled. Then how have you been scraping by for the past week? Even with food in the fridge, you couldn't survive on that alone. I had another account from my bachelor days. I pulled out a bank book from my pocket and flashed her the balance, $220,000. Where did that money come from? I made some cash on stocks before we got hitched. I squirreled it away and never touched it. I quickly snapped the bank book shut and stuffed it back in my pocket. Then that's marital property too. You really are the snake I thought you were. What are you talking about? This isn't marital property. You agreed to that ages ago. What? Before we got married, I told you I wanted to earmark this money for my parents' care, and you were on board. Don't you remember signing the prenup? Oh, did I? This money was what was left after using it for my parents' care. My folks have already passed on, and our daily expenses came out of our shared account, so I'd completely forgotten about this bank book. Looking back, I'm glad we had the prenup, it saved me from going broke and starving. So, this money isn't marital property, and you should be the one paying alimony. I pointed squarely at Nancy. I know everything. I know about your secret spending spree and your affair. Me? Having an affair? Where's your proof? She challenged, her eyes darting away from mine. You met the professor at your part-time gig in the cafeteria and had a fling, right? You probably went on a trip with him. You've got it all wrong. I went on a trip with my mom friends. You've got to believe me, Nancy said, staring me down. But I knew it was a lie. Women who are good at lying look people straight in the eye. Got any proof that I had an affair? Nancy challenged, her tone defiant. If I lost here, I'd end up paying alimony, I thought. I hired a pie. I caught on to the affair when I overheard you yakking on the phone with him a few years back. I recalled catching Nancy on the phone before bed. Yeah, that's right. My husband's retiring soon, so we can divorce then, she'd said. At the time, I thought she was chatting with a mom friend and tried to tune it out. But when I heard divorce, I couldn't help but eavesdrop. Soon we can be out in the open, she had said. I was floored. I wanted to be dead certain she was stepping out, so I quietly hired a detective to sleuth around. The pie's report confirmed 100% that my wife was having an affair. Nancy had started working part-time at the university cafeteria at 58, thanks to a friend's invite, and got tangled up with a professor there. The detective snapped pics. The guy was a rugged-looking dude in his late 50s. The pie got photo evidence of them walking arm in arm and slipping into a hotel together. I showed Nancy the goods. There was no way she could wriggle out of this one. So what if I cheated? I want to divorce you and be with him. Just sign the damn papers already. My love for her had fizzled out ages ago, but her defiant attitude was a gut punch. You're the cheater, so you can't file for divorce. We're staying hitched until I sign. As the at-fault spouse, you're the one who torpedoed the marriage. You can't just bail after having an affair. If you want out to be with your side piece, kiss your share of the assets goodbye. How dare you? All that money's mine, Nancy yelled. As Nancy and I locked horns, the doorbell chimed. Is it that time already? I glanced at the monitor and spotted a familiar face. It's Richard. Nancy's face lit up when she realized our only son had shown up, and she beelined for the door. I trailed behind her to greet him. Richard, you're early, Nancy exclaimed. Richard, please help me, your father is being a monster. When the door swung open and Richard stepped in, Nancy threw herself at him. I haven't done a thing, I said. Don't touch me, you cheater. Richard shoved her away, and Nancy's eyes went wide with shock. Come on, Richard, don't be so cold to your mom, Nancy laughed nervously, playfully tapping Richard's shoulder to lighten the mood. Richard brushed her hand off. Don't touch me. Dad spilled the beans about your affair. You're the worst. No way. Nancy's face drained of color as her son rejected her. While she was off gallivanting, I had filled Richard in on everything. After Nancy split for her trip, I called Richard and told him about the divorce papers and her affair. I didn't want to burden my son with such a bombshell, but I decided he needed the truth before the divorce, so I asked him to come home today. I wanted it to be a lie. I was pissed at Dad for not telling me sooner, but I'm even more livid at you for cheating on him for 2 years. If you knew about the affair, why didn't you divorce me? Do you still have the hots for me? Nancy asked. When I uncovered the affair, I mulled over divorce countless times, but I held back. You didn't bring up divorce because you were gunning for my severance pay. So I bided my time until retirement to snatch all your money and leave you high and dry. I lived with Nancy, always nursing my thirst for payback over her affair. Pick your poison, the assets or the man. I'm fine taking this to court through a lawyer. You're in deep water for cheating, and if you lose, your boy toy will probably lose interest. Men don't like getting tangled up in drama. Nancy's face contorted, and she looked on the verge of tears. He's a brainy university professor, right? He's got a cushy income and is still working so he can bankroll you without my cash. Whether he truly loved Nancy, I couldn't say. Fine, I'll forfeit my share of the assets, just cut me loose. I don't need your stinking money. Divorce settled, I handed her the divorce papers and the agreement. We both signed the papers. She chose a fresh start with her lover over keeping the money. She must be head over heels for that guy. Thanks for everything. The house is in my name, so you need to scram. Your stuff is boxed up outside. Take it and go. Over the past week, I'd packed all her clothes and belongings in boxes and stashed them outside. Nancy frantically checked the boxes and let out a shriek. This is so heartless, just because I strayed. Sobbing, Nancy turned to our only son as her last lifeline. Richard, you're on my side, right? I'm your mother. But Richard looked conflicted and clammed up. I was going to talk about this while I'm here. My wife is pregnant. What? I was blindsided by the joyous news, but Nancy was even more thunderstruck. She'd been chomping at the bit for her first grandkid since Richard tied the knot, itching to help with the baby. But the thought of cradling my grandchild with those cheating hands made my skin crawl. But I can't let a mom who two-timed meet my kid. I'm grateful for raising me, but we're done. Don't ever darken my doorstep again. No way, please wait. Holding her first grandchild was Nancy's dream. At least let me be there for the birth, please reconsider, Nancy pleaded with Richard, but he kept her at arm's length. I'd never let someone as low as you into the delivery room. If anything happens to my wife or child, I'll never forgive you. Nancy, who'd been counting down the days to her grandchild's birth, crumpled to her knees after being disowned by her son. She was a brazen woman, thinking she could cheat and still expect to cuddle her grandkid. You both are so cold-hearted. Don't you love your wife and mother? I'd lost all love for this woman ages ago. It wasn't just the cheating, there were other reasons too. You don't love me either. That retirement dinner you whipped up was all frozen grub, wasn't it? There were other reasons too. The lavish spread on the table for my retirement day was all frozen food. I had carried on because I used frozen meals for my lunches, so I recognized the taste. It was tasty, but the telltale flavor of frozen food left me with mixed feelings. Even my wife celebrates my birthday with a home-cooked meal. Will you always be this half-baked? Love changes people. Richard glowered at Nancy, but I no longer felt a shred of familiar love for this woman. Despite busting my hump at work and pitching in with chores, her neglect snuffed out any spark I had for her. I'm sorry, please don't cast me aside. You are my world. Don't touch me with those filthy hands. You should be groveling to Dad, not me. Nancy was shell-shocked by Richard's fury. I'm sorry for cheating, Dad. I'll give back the money, then hand over the bank book and the seal. Nancy fished the bank book and seal from her purse and passed them to me. What possessed you to cheat in the first place? At first, it was just a lark for me too. But the professor kept buttering me up, saying I was gorgeous. As we knocked back beers, things got out of hand. So, she fell for a smooth-talking snake. I'm taking you and that sleazeball to court for alimony. Brace yourself. When I bellowed, Nancy crumpled to her knees, eyes burning with tears. I'm sorry, she broke down sobbing and kept apologizing. Through the lawyer and the private investigator I hooked up with, we soon sued Nancy and her boy toy for alimony. Nancy, who'd been blubbering, flew into a rage when she was served with the alimony papers. Why? I forfeited my share of the assets, and you've got your golden parachute. You're loaded. I don't even have 2 nickels to rub together. I've been put through the ringer because of your fling. You had a blast with your lover boy, now it's time to face the music. Drag the professor here. Nancy reluctantly dialed up her lover. The 4 of us, the lawyer, Nancy, her paramour, and I, hashed out the felony. The professor fessed up to the affair and spilled the beans about their getaway. You planning on putting a ring on her finger? Nancy seemed head over heels for the professor, but I was curious about where he stood. Marriage? No way. I've got a ball and chain at home. It turns out this university professor was quite the Casanova. He said his romp with Nancy was just for kicks. There were probably other co-eds at the university he had taken for a spin too. You lying snake. You said I was your one and only. I change favorites like I change socks. The lawyer and I couldn't help but smirk at his lame excuse. Anyway, you're coughing up alimony too. If his wife got wind of the affair, he'd be on the hook for a pretty penny to her as well. Nancy might even owe his wife alimony too. Nancy, who'd been genuinely smitten with this cat, now looked like a deer in headlights upon learning he was hitched. She saw their fling as just a bit of fun. She probably thought she'd coast on my dime, but her future now looked pretty grim. I pocketed $30,000 in alimony from Nancy and her lover boy. I was sweating bullets about the statute of limitations for claiming alimony, which is 3 years from uncovering the affair, but it's finally put to bed. Nancy also got slapped with an alimony suit by her lover's wife, which her folks had to cover, leaving her not just broke but in the hole. The university professor vanished from campus and is reportedly locked in a legal slugfest with his wife these days. Nancy's back at her parents' place, weathering their icy glares and feeling like yesterday's news, while juggling multiple gigs to climb out of debt. Having to punch the clock even after retirement must be rough. A few years down the road, I finally kissed the mortgage goodbye and was living it up as a bachelor at home. Today, my son and daughter-in-law are swinging by, so I've been on a cleaning spree since dawn. Just as I put the finishing touches on the place, the doorbell chimed. Oh, they're here. When I swung the door open, my son and daughter-in-law were standing there, and my grandkid was sawing logs in the stroller.